During the Warring States period, battles were an everyday occurrence. People built samurai castles, military defense facilities, to protect themselves from enemies. The samurai castles, which utilized natural terrain such as valleys and roofs, could be considered fortresses that were indispensable for protection against the enemy. The samurai castles that remain today are the result of sturdy construction for protection against enemies. During the Warring States period, when technology was not as advanced as it is today, how were such samurai castles built? This video will show you where and how samurai castles were built, how much they cost, and how long they lasted. If you are interested, please watch to the end. Where are samurai castles built? Since a castle is a defensive facility to protect oneself from enemies, the most ideal location is one that is difficult to attack and easy to defend. The best place that comes to mind is a high place. Some castles are temporarily built on top of mountains to prevent cavalry attacks. However, since these castles emphasize defense by utilizing natural terrain such as valleys and roofs, they are inconvenient to live in. Therefore, an increasing number of castles are being built on land at the foot of mountains, where they can be inhabited in an emergency. But what if there are no mountains in the place you want to protect? In that case, there are only hills and plains. In unusual places, such as riverbanks formed by river erosion or outcrops created by land uplift, an island itself can be used as a castle. In the early modern castle period, the development of stone wall technology made it possible to build artificially high walls to fortify defenses, and castles were built on convenient hills and plains rather than on inconvenient mountain tops. Castles were built in tandem with castle towns where vassals, craftsmen, and merchants lived. During the medieval and early modern periods, castles moved from higher elevations to lower elevations, and their appearance and structures became more complex and multifunctional. However, since they were still defensive facilities, they were always required to be difficult to attack and easy to defend, regardless of their elevation. The two elements were rivers and roads. Rivers were not only moats for defense, but also served the role of transporting goods. A major road, for example, is easy to monitor and intercept because large armies are forced to pass through it. A location with these two characteristics other than a mountaintop is a suitable site for a castle. How much does it cost and how long does it take to build a castle? A castle is a vast site with a castle keep, palace, and other magnificent buildings. You may be wondering what kind of construction is required and how long and how much it will cost. Let me explain in turn. Let's start with the process of building a castle. The first step is to make blueprints. This is similar to building a house. It is a very important process because if this is neglected, the castle, which is supposed to focus on defense, will be full of defects and will be destroyed in no time. The land is selected according to its use. For example, if a lord's castle is to be built, transportation accessibility is important. If a branch castle is to be built, a location near the border with the enemy is chosen, etc. The size of the land selected and determines the size of the castle to be built. The size of the castle is then determined based on the size of the selected land. The layout and shape of buildings, moats, stone walls, etc. are then determined in a process called Nawabari territories, which is followed by the completion of the castle blueprints. Once the blueprints are completed, construction begins. Construction is divided into civil engineering and building work. Civil engineering work includes building moats and piling up stone walls. The stone wall piling was a major event in the construction work, and the feudal lords themselves sometimes took the lead in carrying huge stones to the site, creating a festive atmosphere. After the civil engineering work was completed, the construction work began. Specialized craftsmen such as plasterers and carpenters were hired here. It seems that every big man had an engineer as his vassal. The carpenters involved in the construction of Edo Castle were treated so well that they were given high ranks as feudal lords. As is the case today, professionals with delicate skills were highly valued in this era as well. Next, let us look at how long the above process took. For the feudal lords who were able to move people on a large scale, It seems to have taken about 3 years. Hideyoshi Toyotomi's Hizen Nagoya Castle, built as a base for his invasion of Korea, was constructed in such a short period of time. It was completed in an astonishingly short time of only 8 months. One might think that in such a short period of time, the castle would have been poorly built. However, during the Japanese invasion of Korea, this castle developed into a metropolis that became the political center of Japan. It is truly the work of a master of the land. Next, let us look at the cost. There are few examples of castles for which the total cost of construction is recorded, but the total cost of Matsumai Castle, built at the end of the Edo period, was a whopping 6 billion yen. Daimyo, feudal lords in debt, could not build castles even if they wanted to. Therefore, even if they could find land to build a castle or obtain permission to build a castle, many feudal lords could not raise the money to pay for it and gave up building it in tears. Thus, because it was a huge castle and a defensive facility to protect the lives of the people, it was an extraordinary structure that could not be built without 3 conditions: labor, time, and money. If you take another look at castles with the knowledge that many people spent a lot of time, effort, and money to build them, you may discover something new. A large castle with a strong presence may be the result of a great deal of hard work. The huge stone walls you see in castles. Where did those stones come from? When you visit a castle, have you ever gazed at a stone wall piled up many times taller than you are? The stone walls of Osakajo Castle are said to be 5 meters high, 10 centimeters wide, and weigh more than 100 tons. You may wonder where in the world the overwhelmingly powerful stone walls were transported from. The stones used for the stone wall were quarried at a place called Ishikiriba, or Ishikiri Quarry, but there are almost no records of where they were located within the castle. In the same way that we do not pay attention to the place of origin of the stones used in the accessories we usually buy, many people may not have paid attention to the place of origin in the past. Therefore, the place of origin of the stones in most castles is unknown. Perhaps the stones were quarried from whole mountains and used up so much that not a trace of the mountains remained. However, there are, of course, castles that are known. For example, Himeji Castle in Hyogo Prefecture still has the remains of a stone quarry around the castle. It is known that the Besho Valley was a stone-producing area, and traces of the stone quarrying are said to remain. In some places, the very place where the castle was built was a quarry, and the entire mountain was like a bedrock from which the stones were quarried. So there was no shortage of stone at all. Takeda Castle in Hyogo Prefecture is said to still have stones lying around, so castles in Hyogo Prefecture may have had no trouble finding stone materials. However, not all castles had stone. At Edo Castle in Tokyo, nearly 30 feudal lords shared the responsibility of quarrying and transporting stones. Daimyo may not have wanted to do such hard work, but in order to look good to the shogun, they selected good quality stones and transported them to Edo. Some feudal lords even brought stones from as far away as Osaka. Even if it was to present a good face to a person of high rank, the effort was incredible. However, it was not the feudal lords who actually carried the stones, but the people who worked for them. The hard labor and toil of these people must have been blood-curdling. And at the same time, I wonder if they were properly compensated for their hard work. How did they transport the large stones? Nowadays, trucks and other heavy machinery can transport large stones, but there was no such equipment at the time the castle was built. Then, how were they transported? Some of the materials were transported across the sea. Many of the stones used for stone walls weigh several tens of tons, so the method of transportation is a concern. Of course, it was not possible to transport the entire stone pile, so the stones were probably quarried and then transported. But even then, they did not have the fine tools we have today. Stones were not cut with a saw, but with a V-shaped arrow. A hole was dug along the line to be split, like a cut-through, and an iron arrow was inserted into the hole and struck from above, causing the stone to split to the left or right. It is amazing that the person who invented this method of splitting stones. This method of splitting stones was used in the same way all over Japan. So, when you visit a castle with a stone wall, take the time to appreciate each stone. You may find arrow holes that have cracked and landed on the edge of the stone, or arrow holes that remain uncracked. You can witness the craftsmanship of warriors hundreds of years ago. The fact that all the work was done by hand means that it required a lot of labor, and we can expect that the skill and effort of the people of the Warring States period were immeasurable. It seems that ships were used to transport the quarried stones if they were far away from the site. However, ships carrying dozens or hundreds of tons of cargo must have been unstable, even for modern ships. So many stone ships sank due to high waves and windbreaks. According to the records of Edo Castle, there were about 300 ships that sank, which shows the hardships faced by the people of that time. Even if they were successfully transported to land, they were placed on sleds made of wood and pulled by hand by a large number of people using logs as wheels. Small stones were carried by people. Since the work was completely manual, it is not difficult to imagine that hundreds or thousands of people must have carried the stones, and the labor must have been tremendous. The stones that could not be carried in any way were dumped near the quarry. Difference between a white castle and a black castle. Finally, let me explain the difference between a castle with impressive white walls and one with impressive black walls. In fact, this is not based on the preference of the person who built it, but on which period it was built. Black castles were built during the reign of Hideyoshi, before the Battle of Sekigahara. The White Castle was built after the Battle of Sekigahara, during the reign of Ieyasu Tokugawa. Black and white also have meanings. The meaning of black is that it has an advantage unique to the Warring States period, when it was easy to hide from the eyes of the enemy. On the other hand, the meaning of white is that white, an expansion color, makes the castle itself appear larger and is a symbol of victory, and there is a theory that Ieyasu chose white, the symmetrical color of black, to show that it was his era. Although there may have been some preference, it may also have had a meaning only possible during wartime and only possible after the war was over. This is the explanation of how the castle was built. What did you think of this video? I hope you have learned that many people were involved in the construction of the castle and that a lot of hard work was involved. We will continue to introduce samurai, shoguns, and castles on this channel. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.